CitizenCon 2951. So it's really, really good to be back in front of the camera and talking to all of you out there. I wish it was in person. As you know, we have been doing CitizenCons for a long time, and last year was the last year we didn't do it because of the pandemic. And we didn't want to go another year without having a CitizenCon, but we felt like this year it was a bit too close to get back to do it in person with all the issues with travel, and we're doing it virtually and digital this year. And I'm hoping next year we'll get to do it in person. So it's been very challenging for all of us. There's about 720 of us have all been working from home. But you know, a silver lining to that cloud, which is a lot more of you have had more time to play Star Citizen and give us feedback and get engaged. I mean, we, compared to where we were in the last time we had a physical CitizenCon in 2019, the number of daily players that we have in Star Citizen is on average 2 to 3 times more than we had back in 2019, which is fantastic. 2020 was a big year of expansion for us. 21 is also been incredibly great. And we're hoping with some of the features that we're working on, like server meshing, we're working on a bunch of optimizations, quality of life, and maturing some of the gameplay loops that you're starting to see happen. I mean, we've got some stuff coming up like Death of a Spaceman, where the first part of it, the medical gameplay, is going to be there, and also the beginning of physical inventory with the personal inventory. It's not fully finished yet. Those are 2 major game changers that are coming very shortly. In fact, they're coming with 3.15, and there's a lot of other things that are just beyond that. We're going to continue that momentum, and more and more people will be discovering Star Citizen, and more you will be spending more hours playing it and having fun, giving us great feedback, and we're inevitably inching towards the finish line of having something that we can say, yep, this is the definitive experience for you guys. And so I'm really excited by that. But let's get back to today. And today is about Digital CitizenCon, and we've got some really great stuff to show you. The first of that is going to be led off by Todd Pappy with Ian Leland and David Haddock. And I don't want to spoil it. There's some really great stuff. It's going to use a combination of some features that are coming very soon and some features and content that is a little further down the road. But it's going to give you a taste of life to come in the Star Citizen universe. So without further ado, let me pass it to them.
Here we go, everyone. I hope everyone's excited. CitizenCon. Yes, we are here at CitizenCon 2951. 2001 in our time, right? So I hope everyone enjoys. Stay tuned for more content. And we are here for the CitizenCon event. And I hear it is a doozy. And it's going to look a lot better than it normally does. Bring it on, Pyro. Right? Pyro's coming, I hope. Well, we'll see. And stay tuned, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Happy, Star Citizen Live Game Director.
Hi, I'm Ian. I'm the art director for Star Citizen.
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm the narrative director at Star Citizen.
So finally, we're saying goodbye to Stanton. It's quite precious to us. We've been talking about it. We've been looking at it. We've been living there for quite a long time. Now it's time to, move the conversation on, start to look at something new. Now it's changed slightly, the jump point side, is from what we saw a little while ago. One of the things that was quite important for Chris is he wanted that feeling of something that was quite wondrous, something that was quite amazing. It's not dark, it's not mysterious, it's not hostile, but it's more, like I said, wondrous.
So when we started looking at Pyro, and we had to start looking at how the jump points work when we're traveling from Stanton to Pyro or Pyro to Stanton, and thinking about border security, the infrastructure that's needed there. What's the lore? Just because on one side it's very lawless versus the other side is dealing with the UEE. So we needed to go through and really think about how this was working, and then also with the jump points, how smugglers would work with the secondary and tertiary routes that would lead into the main jump point and then funnel out.
Yeah, we kind of call it, internally, we kind of call it the Swiss cheese approach of the, there's sort of the main entrance that you would go through on Stanton, which would be the sort of guarded, have the infrastructure that you had mentioned, the security and stuff like that, but the possibility that there would be alternate ways to kind of get in to bypass that, so which would be beneficial knowledge for smugglers or criminals who are trying to get in under the radar. And also it was if there's a lot of infrastructure around it, it sort of created this impression that that infrastructure was responsible for the jump point. In reality, it's a naturally occurring thing. An interesting balance of make it seem like this is a checkpoint, but at the same time it's something that the ships are creating, not the structures.
So before we go too much further into the Pyro system, let's take a deep dive into the op process with Jake Dunlap, and he's going to be taking us through the authoring process for the Stanton and Pyro jump points.
Bringing jump points to the verse has been an interesting journey as we've been designing a new element in our game. We've put a lot of time into creating two solid examples of different types of jump points you'll eventually see all around the verse, one in Stanton and one in Pyro. We've been continuing to use Houdini as the tool to create these gas clouds. The setup we have for them is a parent gas cloud and a child gas cloud. The parent is mainly used as an establishing shot when you arrive in your ship from quantum travel, while the child is used as the main gameplay environment and is placed inside the parent. The child also has a reasonable scale, which keeps your average ship speed in mind. These things aren't nearly the size of real nebula, if you're curious. But by no means are the jump points small. Here's an example of a Pyro jump point next to Microtech. To explain the process a bit more, we create the parent at a large scale, then cut out a small box in the center of it. Inside the small box, we'll gather the volume data from the parent, up-res that, and then add details. The details will be different depending on what type of gas cloud you want and if you want to easily fly through it or not. We usually spend time investigating different designs for the gas clouds, but with the Stanton jump point, the work had already been started and used in the 2019 CitizenCon demo. We just had to go through, clean up the Houdini file and get it game ready with a couple of extra tweaks along the way. Some of the tweaks we made to the parent were making it feel like more of a structurally sound rotating disk. This was to make it feel like a safe and well-used jump point. The child gas cloud here was changed more dramatically. It used to have a bunch of dark clouds around it. We felt that it was feeling a little bit too closed in, so we spent time morphing the magnetic lines in the center to create a really interesting horizontal, flowing, relaxing composition to visually show you that Stanton itself is generally a safe place at first glance. The parent gas cloud for Pyro was created with the same process as the Stanton parent, but we changed the shape of the cloud into something more menacing and violent. We wanted the reveal of Pyro to be a clear warning of what you should be expecting throughout the entire system, so we made it very closed in, dense, and very active. We did make it a small challenge to traverse the child, something that won't take too long but should be something to consider when traveling through. Something that helped really quickly create a fun traversal route was creating a white box play area in engine out of solid geometry and flying around it right away. After we were happy with the route, we exported the geometry to use in Houdini, where we converted it to a volume and combined it with the upresed area of the parent to export that out as the child cloud. We wanted to make sure that these systems feel very different from each other. Some ways in which we did this was by the shape of the jump points. As I had mentioned before, Stanton feels very clean, put together, and generally safe with the disc-like form that it has, but Pyro feels like it's more violent, distressed, and this shows in its form. The comparison is shown well in both of the child clouds. In the Stanton child cloud, we have nice long strands of the magnetic waves that encapsulate the jump point that feel harmonious, beautiful, and free, whereas in the Pyro cloud, it shows almost the opposite. The walls feel like they're closing in on you, moving in unpredictable ways, completely unstable. Your ship could enter into a wall and disappear within a second. Lighting also plays a big role in how we feel about these spaces. You can see these are dramatically different areas in the mood and tone, and lighting is the key to that. So that's a brief look at jump points. They've evolved quite a bit since last time you saw them. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks, Jake. So one of the things that players will first probably come across when they come into the Pyro system is the space station. You know, it was discovered a long time ago. It was sort of deemed uninhabitable because it was just too dangerous with that variable flare star going on. So they kind of utilized the system for resources, and then when they kind of tapped out, they just sort of left, and that's when all the sort of squatters came in. So there's sort of older infrastructure built to sustain kind of the mining activities and the gas harvesting and stuff like that, but you know, they just basically left, and then other populations started to slowly move into the system, criminals, squatters, survivors, and whatever, and start to kind of take over what was left behind.
Which gives us some unique gameplay comparatively to Stanton and the space stations there. So with Pyro, since they're in such disrepair, some of them are inhabited, some of them are completely abandoned, and then so the players can go and explore, they can go and see what's happened there. Whether it's been hit by an asteroid, or if it's there was some sort of conflict there before, but you'll be able to go and explore the different decks and be able to go and meet new people, meet the frontier lifestyle, enjoy it.
Okay, so before we go to the inside of the stations, we're going to jump now to Eric, and he's going to go in a bit more detail, the concept development process taken when looking at the exteriors.
Hi, I'm Eric Gagnon, Principal Concept Artist on Star Citizen. The goal of that initial step of sketch development is to create something not invited. Dangerous, damaged by asteroids, and surrounded by floating debris. Hiding place for outlaw, looks old, decrepit. Lawless, no security force here. Approach at your own risk. Industrial look, messy, but not abandoned. Some parts are wrecked, but under repair and raw looking. I like to use the black and white sketches to start. It allows us to go very quickly and focus on the shape only. We then try to play with a touch of color to define more of the commercial port platform. We try different schemes to remind us of the whole look with a rusty vibe and brown tones. Adding a touch of light and some context around the sketch allows to see the scale of things and properly view the silhouette. We expand on the idea to play with the mechanism and functionality. This is the color sketches of the asteroid Hunter Harpoon and at different angles. In this sketch, we can clearly feel the arrival of the asteroids and the dismantling or destruction zone. We also need some top angles to properly showcase the size and scale of it. With all those elements in place, we can now build a nice plate of the entire concept for the asteroids harpoon with all the pieces together. The Shantytown module habitation is a nice idea to add a kind of small city on the outskirts of the space station. So here I sketched those shapes to create something very modular. From the grayscale, it's pretty easy to do a color pass. I played with a color palette that reflects the vibe of Shantytown. In this sketch, here we can easily see how cool the area is going to be. Another angle shot here is pretty nice too. Playing with warm and cold color contrast is interesting. All those different angles help define and expose the different elements of the concept to properly illustrate it. Now we have a nice board of this sketch phase. We apply the same process here for the commercial port platform. The black and white sketches are a good way to go. In this image, we see the silhouette shape sketches for the front of the port platform structure. A quick side view plan here is necessary to well build this design. We fill the form and the ratio and the size of what we want to achieve. And of course, we create a color sketch to see what it could be. We see the industrial look and some potential details to better define and deep dive into. For those, we have a deeper design exploration of this industrial area. Pipes, tanks, angular shapes, and a color touch. Combining 2D and 3D sketches really help properly communicate the design intent. It's a common technique now, but it's really efficient to highlight areas of the concept. Using 3D is also very useful for level designers to validate the size and shape of things when creating the environment in-game. Let's talk about the big repair machinery ID. This machine could be used to repair surfaces damaged by asteroids, inspired from the heavy machinery that we see in mining. Nice to see the overall add-on IDs brought together on a single board. It gives a great look and makes you want to see the next design step. The mood looks. We also create a mood board from our different shots. This shows how lighting is used to set the tone of the environment by giving different options and color palettes. Finally, we provide some options for paint of the exterior surfaces. We work from a list of brands and factions that we need to incorporate to the design. We started from the narrative things, worked to build the visual identity of the different brands, exploring different ways to represent them and the environment, stickers, flat surfaces, graffiti, or official paint job. This really brings the sketches alive and set in the universe of Star Citizen. The Outlaw Station are a staple of the Pyro system, and we hope this first exterior concept phase excites you as much as we had fun to create it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Looks great.
That's the exterior. So right now we're going to go from the outside and we're going to jump to the interior. Before we really started exploring anything, one of the core concepts that was discussing as a group was the idea of power and the idea of heat. Now, we've got like this big interior layout of this, maybe this old mining station. How would they have adapted the space? You know, they would have, like, okay, we need power here. Okay, that will create heat. So we started thinking about, okay, where would the heat lamps be? And then where would light come from? So just the principal concept of power, creating heat, creating light, that was pretty much the core of the start of the visual development process.
So when we started talking about it from a design side, we needed to make sure that we were covering certain shops, just basic needs for the player. Everything's bare bones. It could be that it used to be a clothing store, now it's a food shop, and so they've converted it. The gang's moved in. You know, it's not what it used to be, and but you see that old skeleton there.
One of the things that definitely we've been talking about with Pyro that we didn't really get to see in Stanton is the idea of the sort of the gang presence. So, you know, that idea that they're the sort of local law in the area. So, you know, you might see gang members coming and shaking down some of these shopkeepers for protection money or rent, you know, type thing.
Or even shaking down the player.
Yeah, which would be very fun. not for me. But.
So when we started to explore some of the side areas, there were other factors that we had to cover. Habitation, clinics, you know, players need a place to sleep, to log out, as well as players need a way to get themselves healed. And then we started taking the same treatment or similar treatment that we were doing with the main market area and started to take it into the hubs and how they were possibly repurposed, or the clinics and how those were possibly repurposed. So, and just make sure that everything felt cohesive in its raw, natural form. In the way that we have the station structured, we haven't let players go into like living quarters of where the people that lived at the station would be, or even into the lower decks where the power, where the gravity generators are. And this is where we're going to start introducing these areas, and it opens up new opportunities for the players to go explore and do new things. But it's also areas that the gang might want to protect.
Yeah, it offers a lot of possibilities for mission content, you know, whether it's actually maybe working for the gang itself or other kind of little small things you could do inside there to really kind of, drive you deep into the bowels of this thing.
Okay, so that's a little look at the insides of the stations, but now we'll jump to Christian, and Christian is going to take us on a little bit of a deeper dive into the concept development process of the inside of the stations.
Hi, my name is Christian Doretz. I'm a senior concept artist on the environment team, and we're going to look at the concept development for the space station a little bit. So first off, we looked at the heat map. So there is a lot of what I said, the electricity is gone, the heating is gone, and the breathable air, the oxygen is gone. So there is pretty much all of those connected areas. They are lifeless in a way, right? So you wouldn't settle down somewhere in between those empty corridors. We were trying to sort our thoughts and get them on paper, right? So we were exploring different ideas that we on the concept team had in mind. So we were thinking about pathways that the player and the NPC could take. So what would happen? We were thinking about what would happen if all of a sudden one pathway is blocked off, or another one will open up, right? So we were thinking about verticality and how the players or the NPCs can traverse all of those interesting areas that are, in the end, pretty ominous, right? So think about, there are some people just screwing off side panels on the wall, or they are screwing off ceiling panels, and you would see all of the maintenance areas behind it. So we'd see a lot of struts, a lot of working areas. There's cables hanging. So those were the very first sketches where we could see what those eventually could evolve into. And we also started then slowly with some loose 3D sketches. So getting everything into 3D, and it's pretty much evolved over time, where we could talk to the environment guys, and we were asking for some of the current rest stops geo and some of the textures, and then getting them into 3D. And we were just changing up all of the props, all of the side panels, or all of the whole the environment. So we could, looking back at the references, then convey this feeling. We could introduce more dirt. We could introduce some damaged panels, side panels, and pretty much explore this side area, right? And the big advantage of this is that we can make the environment how we like. So one thing that we did is like kill all the lights because we don't need lighting. We want to create our own lighting. And this is what I said earlier. The current rest stops are super bright. They're family friendly. But now we want to make it ominous. We want to make it dark mood. We want to make it super dark with the players like always feeling kind of in danger, and especially with the gang members in mind, right? So this would allow us to create one of the very early, or one of the earlier 3D explorations, which then lead to one of the final concept arts, or the final implementation of this. So when we were at a point where we were kind of okay, or where we thought like, okay, this is an environment that we want to see, then we took care about the last 20%. So the last 20% in this case means having a final render and painting over. So we were just painting over in Photoshop and doing some more refinements for the mood and the lighting. We were painting in some of the decaling and some of the graffitis, because it is ultimately easier to do all these things in 2D than in 3D and caring about the materials. So we were able to just refine the final concept in this regard. And this wasn't a straight process from A to B. It was an iterating process. So in between, if you're looking at some of the other concepts, for example, the barriers, we were at one point thinking about what would happen if we introduce barriers that the gang members then would set up on one point. So what does that mean for you as a player? What is the player doing, or what is the player doing at this point? So will he encounter these gang members? Will he try to find a way around? Is he going to use some of the ladders or the underground vents, for example? So we were changing the concepts here and there, more or less. And this leads to, in the end, having a nice variety of concepts, or different types of concepts that we then could cherry pick the best parts of it, or in other teams, the environment team, the design team could cherry pick the best ideas from those concepts. And this was pretty much a rundown of the concept development for the Pyro space station's interior.
Thanks, Cristiano. Looked appropriately scummy.
So we've been talking a lot about the insides of the stations. We've been looking at a lot of the concept art. But now we can jump to Josh, and Josh is going to talk about one of my favorite parts of the process, and it's when we take some concepts and we start to do some ideation, some visual development in the engine.
Hi, my name's Josh Van Zorlen. I'm the principal environment artist here at Cloud Imperium Games. Today we're going to be going through the Pyro space station's visual target and pre-production sort of things that we're going to be doing for these rundown / outlaw space stations. So what I have here right in front of me now is obviously the food court from our Stanton space stations. We've just dragged the wear up on all of them. So now we're getting all of this really nice grime on all of these surfaces, right? So if I turn off my working lights, which hopefully are gonna, produce that mood that we're after. So I'll turn on that right now. So a number of things have happened right in front of us, right? You can instantly see we've got lots of heavy fog coming in. Don't pay too much attention to the particles now. I'll go into them a little bit later. We've got some light panels up here shooting through the rafters, and we've got another one over here as well, right? So we're gonna do a quick little thing here. It's adding in some cables, right? And now this is really important, not only to achieve the art direction, but it gives us a really nice level of parallax within the scene, right? We have a couple of design constraints within this space as well. One of those being we have a gang and then a general civilian population, right? Now, one of the things that we wanted to do in terms of that design in this particular space was separate it out in like a kind of class type system, right? So we're going to start to explore some of the requirements of that. One of that being that, like I mentioned before, you can't get up here unless you're in favor with the gang. So we need to put in the instruments that are going to help portray that, and that is a checkpoint, right? So, and just a side note, all of this stuff is super work in progress and nothing is final. So don't read too much into it. So from here, we're missing a few bits and pieces, right? But one of the ways that we're gonna solve that is with graffiti. All right, so I'm gonna turn on those decals now. You can start to see that the walls here are starting to disappear a little bit. It's a very subtle effect in this particular area, but you'll start to see how much more it comes through in others, right? So moving on from here, we need to start putting the stuff in the environment. So bear with me for a sec when I turn this on. All right, so got here is a lot of stalls, right? We really want to get that cramp vibe in, like that was kind of similar in the concept, and start seeing how far we can push the limitations of what we can do in the engine, but also what we can do with our technical systems as well, right? One of the things that was immediately apparent to us is that AI is really tricky to deal with when in tight and enclosed spaces, right? So we need to look at areas like this here and this here to make sure that it's wide enough that a few AI can pass each other or a player and not, you know, look completely gross, right? Now, I mentioned lighting before. So I'm gonna turn off the working lights that we've got so far, and you'll start to see what I mean. So we've got a whole bunch of stalls here at the moment. The entire scene is being lit by the stalls itself. This has already come a long way, and the stalls themselves have had a bit of a lighting pass, so this is already starting to look quite nice, but we're not getting, you know, that thickness that we were getting up on the top level, right? We're not getting that little bit of life to a certain extent. And we're also getting these areas here where they just fall completely into darkness, which is not fun. So obviously, like I said before, we'd be doing lighting as we go through this process, but just to see how much of an impact that pass can do on an environment like this, we'll just turn it on for you. So you start to instantly see we've now got a lot more thickness within the environment. And if I just double check just to make sure that our lights are generating correctly, cool. So we're getting a lot more voluminous lighting now. We're getting all of these heaters coming in now, the heat shimmering off them. We've got these little portable ones lighting up the place. We've got some ones that are hanging from the roof, ones that are over in the corners and stuff like this, right? So we're starting to get a lot more mood in this. This is starting to feel really nice now. Now, what I was mentioning in terms of the rain, right? So yes, we're talking about the rain now. Why is there rain inside, right? So this is generally a really cold station. And when people are in this area that's in the center, because there's so much stuff happening here, it's starting to get warmer, right? You've got the heaters here, you've got the gang that is kind of maintaining a lot of this stuff and producing a lot of the heat themselves. Everyone, this is prime real estate for where everyone wants to be, right? So what happens when you have this many people cooking food in this one small area, you know, breathing hot air, that sort of thing, it all starts to rise in this environment, and it starts to get that massive cavern, right, that we've got up here, all the way up to the roof there. As it goes up, it starts to cool down, right? And we start to get precipitation inside, where it starts to rain. And even in many instances, we start to get a little bit of ice coming through as well. So that means once it's all fallen down here, it's actually quite wet and damp. It's still cold, a little bit warm around heaters, but it's generally quite damp because of that weird kind of event. Now, the rain as it currently sits is just a placeholder asset that we're borrowing from Squadron, and that will have to obviously be remade to suit the amount of rain that we want to have within this environment, which won't be, you know, crazy, but it serves as a proof of concept for what we're trying to achieve, right? So that is pretty much Pyro Stations. I hope you really enjoyed seeing the breakdown that we've done here today, learning a little bit about the process of going in and doing a visual target, and you know, just a little bit more of that earlier process and problem solving that we go through. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed the rest of CitizenCon here today, and I'll catch you later.
Cool, thanks Josh. That was looking really good. All right, so as we continue our process of exploring the Pyro system, now I think it'd be good to look a little bit at the planets and moons that populate the system. Now, one of the things we thought would be interesting to talk about is how do we design a system from the ground up? As with all of this, we always start from narrative, you know, before we put any pen to paper or we have any discussions about player experience. We always start from, you know, the world that, you know, Dave and others have kind of built.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and again, it's also the thing of, you know, the Pyro, I think, was first initially conceived very early on in the process, but once we finally are tackling it from a realistic, practical, how we're going to build this, what is each planet going to look like, you know, it's important, you know, to ask more questions about to flesh it out more, because we kept it intentionally kind of vague because we want the art team to, you guys, to do what you do and the designers to do what they do.
So when we started that exploration process, we knew we had like a ballpark that we needed to stay in. So we literally thought, okay, how do we design a system? And fundamentally, it kind of comes into maybe 3 key areas. So because we're a space game, the establishing shot of that planet is very, very important, because it describes everything from, you know, continent breakup, fundamental palette. So right from the get-go, we started to sketch in ideas of what the key establishing shots were going to be like. And then from there, then we jump into key art. So key art is basically on the surface, what is the mood, what's the tone that we're expecting to see. And as you're saying, like the first one we wanted to tackle was Para 1, because, you know, David described this wonderful picture, and it was already clear in our minds about what it wanted to look like. So we hit that first, and, you know, we wanted something hostile, we wanted something hazardous. Also, as part of this process is we knew our current tech limitations, but we also knew what we wanted to do in terms of our future tech, you know, future planet tech, weather, you know, so we kind of went crazy with ideas as we was exploring. So we went through the various planets, did some key art, and again, put them up on the board, and just to validate, we are keeping within that palette, but we're getting that diversity. We're getting that diversity of color, hue, value structure, silhouettes, composition, because even within something like Stanton, there's variety. You know, that was very important for me and the team, where you want to feel like you're on a space opera. You can travel around, but now we're going to a completely other system. So we continued that ideation process there. So we had the establishing shots, we had some key art, and then from there is we create like what we call like breakout packs. This is where, when we're talking through with design about, you know, what are the interactables that the player maybe will come across, what are the minables, what are the harvestables, and then from there we start to build out literal breakouts for, or almost asset packs that will go to the team. Now from there, like, we did a first pass exploration, and what we did is we put it all together on a single board for Chris to have almost like a commander's view of a new system. You know, we showed it to yourself, Dave, we showed it to Chris, we showed it to Todd, and right, you know, on one sheet, you've got the establishing shots, you've got the key art, you've got the breakout. And for me personally, that's how I like to work. I like to see that, like I said, a commander's view of an entire system. And then from there, you can kind of tweak, adjust, and, you know, mold things into what play experience we want to put forward. So that was a snapshot of the visual exploration process we use when designing a system from the ground up. Now we can take a break from us talking and go to an art video, a sizzle video created by the art team. And what this will show is, it will show a kaleidoscope of planets and moons from Pyro, and it will also showcase some of the latest and greatest art techniques and processes and tools that the art team have. Awesome. I'm fully in love with Pyro, and hopefully from seeing that video, hopefully you guys are too. So as a continuation now, we can jump to Sebastian, and Sebastian will talk to you a little bit more about the cloud authoring process and some of our latest cloud tech. Then we can jump to Maximilian. Maximilian will talk a little bit about geology creation, how we create that type of biome. And then lastly, we can go to Özlem, and Özlem will go into a lot more detail about how we take some of the concept art that we've been showing of the botanicals and how we interpret that to in-game artwork.
Hi, my name is Sebastian, and I'm a principal environment artist on the Planet content team. I'll be talking a bit about the data that's defining the visuals of the volumetric clouds and how we create it. Crusader was our first astronomical object that made use of the volumetric cloud tech that's being built by Carsten Wenzel and others. While working on Crusader, we learned a lot on what kind of data gives us which results and what is better to be avoided. With the tech being new, we also needed all new workflows for it. We are currently building more tools for producing the data, so we expect to get better, more complex results in less time in the future. We are evaluating everything from a very manual process that involves painting every pixel to a fully procedural one with little to no artist input, and we will probably end up somewhere between the two. This essentially means that what you are about to see is very likely subject to change. Due to the way the shader works, we can either throw random data at it and hope for happy accidents, or we can be very specific with the data and what kind of cloud formations come out of it in certain areas of the planet. For most use cases, there are two types of textures that need to be created. The first of which is the global property map, which determines what type of cloud is being used at any point on the planet's surface. It is also used for controlling the color placement of non-water-based clouds, but I'll get to that later. The other map is for defining the types of clouds and is named accordingly. The cloud type map allows us to control the cloud density and the impact of the two separately tiling 3D noises, which add detail and definition to what would otherwise be fairly low resolution shapes. The way the two textures interact is maybe best compared to forming a vase out of clay on a pottery wheel, and that's kind of what we're going to do now. In this video, we are revolving half the silhouette of a vase around a circular pattern, which gives us a vase-like shape in 3D space. The big difference to a pottery wheel though is that we can not only feed it data in the shape of a circle, but ultimately whatever shape we want. With the density channel, we can control how thick the clouds appear. White pixels represent very dense clouds, black pixels produce no clouds at all, and then we also have everything in between. There's always a tiny bit of impact from the tiling noises, which you can see to have an effect on the lower density regions. The shaping noise and its control texture are the most impactful in terms of turning a nicely shaded volume into something we can clearly identify as clouds. How much it gets to affect the shape of the clouds depends on the brightness in the corresponding channel of the cloud type map. By combining density and shaping noise, we can model everything from dense clouds to soft, more ethereal shapes, and everything in between. The last of the cloud type map channels controls the erosion noise. It is lower resolution than the shaping noise, since its main purpose is to add an extra layer of small detail. We usually just add it everywhere, unless we specifically want soft clouds with less definition. Black values add details in the way the tiling noise is authored, while white values invert the noise, and medium gray values mean that the noise has no impact. Maybe you can already get a feeling for the complexity of the system and how every pixel in every channel can have a dramatic effect on the end result. Another thing we can change are the tiling 3D noises themselves. By default, a cauliflower-like noise is used for the shaping to model those fluffy sheep-like cumulus clouds. But by changing it to a different 3D noise, we can produce some more abstract cloud shapes that wouldn't normally occur on Earth. This is an area, in combination with different global data, we keep investigating to produce more alien cloud formations in the future. We've been advancing this approach with Pyro 5, another gas giant, which brings me to the other use of the global property map. It has a second channel, which, in combination with a color gradient, is used to control the global color of the clouds for not so physically correct coloring of the gas giants. We sometimes have to restrain ourselves to not make brightly colored balls of cotton candy. There are a lot more settings that allow us to tweak everything from how the clouds are shaded and shadowed, over the global impact and frequency of the detail noises, to parameters that drastically change what results the textures I've shown you today produce. You'll have to bear with us as we'll figure out if there's a best combination of settings and how those might change once all the features that are still planned eventually get added. By now you've probably seen a fair amount of volumetric clouds as part of this year's CitizenCon, and are quite likely to see a bunch more. Because of that, and since I'm still an artist at heart, I'll leave you with this bad drawing of a cat instead of more epic cloudscapes. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Max and I'm a senior environment artist at CIG. I am part of the Planet team where my focus is on planet and asset creation. I want to give you some insight into how we transform simple terrain shapes to a final biome, plus a little preview of what you can expect in the future. When creating a new biome, we start by assigning ground textures to the terrain geometry. For this research and development desert biome, we chose a selection of different types of sand and soil. For additional depth and detail, we have the option to use displacement mapping. The next step is adding our first layer of ground cover assets. In our game, ground cover is any low-cost asset up to knee height, which does not require collision and allows us to use a lot of these assets to create a nice level of density. Here we use a mix of gravel, patches of moss, and dry grass. After that, we add slightly bigger assets in the form of clusters of desert bushes to give context to the smaller assets and add variety. We finish the object scattering pass by adding individual larger rocks and arrangements of small rocks, which give the player a better understanding of how far away something is when walking, driving, or flying over a planet. For performance reasons, we use a range of settings like randomized rotation and scale values to get as much variety as possible out of the number of assets we created, to mimic a level of complexity that feels organic and comparable to what you find on Earth. Something that we have been missing on our current planets and moons are massive rock formations due to tech limitations. Some of these limitations have since been solved. For example, we are now able to render assets much further. Because of that, we recently kicked off a research and development phase during the production of the Pyro system to find workflows for the creation and distribution of cliffs. Full disclosure though, this is early in development and heavily work in progress, but we still wanted to give you a little glimpse of what to expect in the future. The challenge for us will be to figure out how we can make these assets look as good as possible from all angles. If a player walks up to them on foot, they must look just as good as when a player decides to land his ship on the highest point of a cliff. But we are excited to add an even more epic level of scale to our game. That's it for me. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of CitizenCon.
Hello, my name is Özlem and I'm part of the Organics team. Today I want to talk a bit about how we build the different biomes on Pyro 3. Pyro 3 is a planet with very distinct biomes. For example, we got the yellow moss biome that is a strong contrast to the dark volcanic regions. We have some icy areas, boulder fields, acidic fields, different coastlines, and a lot more. When working on a biome, the first thing we do is to have a look at the concept art. We do an asset breakdown for all the elements we need to recreate the scene. By doing so, we get more information about what kinds of rocks and vegetation assets we need, the proportions of the assets in relation to the character, the distribution and frequency of those assets on the planet, but also the amount of coverage per biome on the planet. We can also get information about the color palette, the terrain colors, and what to scatter on the coastlines. The last thing we can see from the concepts is the asset and ground materials. We also try to reduce the amount of the asset packs because of performance and time constraints. Instead of doing 50 unique rocks, we can achieve the same result by using just 3 with our procedural scattering system, since the assets will be scaled and rotated randomly. After figuring out all the necessary elements, we start with the whiteboxing phase. This means doing a very quick mock-up of the scene by using very simple assets. The white boxes should just represent the shape and color of the final object. We do that to see if the asset breakdown we did beforehand is working in the 3D space as well. At this stage of the process, we can still change the whole look of the scene if we don't like the outcome yet. We can say, let's make the rocks 5 times bigger, or blue instead of red, and so on. Or we realize we need to do some research on a specific asset to solve it visually, which was the case for the moss, for example. When doing R&D on the moss, we were trying different shapes and sizes, and we also had to figure out how to do the moss strands that are covering the whole mesh. To make the workflow for the moss strands a bit easier, we used Houdini to procedurally scatter them. Otherwise, it would have been too time-consuming to place every single moss strand by hand, since there are several thousands of them. After figuring out how to do the moss strand, we still didn't like the overall shape of the moss, as it was a bit too blobby and yellow. We wanted something that looked a bit more natural and integrates better into the terrain, so we created some rocks with a moss blend on top instead. We broke up the moss shape even further because it looked a little bit too molten, and we added different kinds of moss strands to get a little bit more variety. In the end, all these things got us to a result that we were satisfied with. The usual approach to setting up a biome is to start with the largest elements first and work your way to the smallest one. If we take the moss preset as an example, we would start by adding the largest elements first, then adding some smaller moss patches around it to create a nice fall-off. We continued with adding some flatter grass to make it sit nicer on the terrain. But then we realized we needed something bigger to bring the elements closer together, so we decided to add some high grass as well. The final steps are adding some ground cover like small rocks or tiny moss. As you can see, while building a biome, we need to do several iterations to get the best visuals. Thank you for watching.
Thanks to Seb, Maxi, and Aslam for showing us their work. So when we started looking at outposts and started really from a ground up on how to make it so that there's more diverse gameplay in there, the player can approach it in multiple different routes. There can be combat encounters. There can be social encounters. So we needed to kind of rebuild and rethink the way that we were doing this. We started honing in on what was working, what wasn't working, and then did a lot of adjustments.
Yeah. We've had outposts in our game for some time. You know, when we started to hear from on our side for what the design requirements are going to be, fundamentally thinking about these as modules, thinking about them as thematic modules and, you know, very specific, then, you know, already like the mind was going of like, okay, we're going to need a kind of like a paradigm shift in terms of how we visually present these. You know, what could these settlements kind of feel like? And, you know, as with everything with outposts, it's you know, it's a gameplay or it's a location archetype. It's the smallest, probably one of the smallest location archetypes that we have. And then in time that will lead to like, you know, villages and towns. And
yeah, thinking about how we wanted to push this forward. I mean, Chris has always talked about putting outposts into players' hands. And so we needed to think about how would this expand? How would the players be able to make these homes feel, you know, homes or outposts or even businesses feel unique for the way that they want to play. And then there were even tools that we had to create in order to actually be able to embed these into the ground and make sure that it worked much better than what we did in Stanton, because with those we had to have them kind of on stilts and you know, just the points of contact were very limited for the ground.
Right. If I connect these modules together, how do we get something that doesn't feel like?
Well, I know that design, we came up, in particular, Andreas and Dan came up with a long list of things, you know, okay, well, here's what we'll need in HABs, here's what we'll need, you know, for utilitarian, here's what we'll need for defenses, here's what we'll need for power and some oxygen, life support, so on and so forth. So there was a very long list, and then it's how can we take those and make them feel unified and visually unified together.
Yeah. Fundamentally, the thing that probably got us the most excited is finally we've started to think about these as like unified settlements, you know, base building. So as you can see on some of the concepts, we deliberately presented early exploration shots in this kind of like semi-isometric view to see, you know, how does it feel if I'm laying out my base? How would these modules kind of, you know, tie together? And you know, it kind of got the team excited, and finally we were thinking, all right, these settlements are going to be more than just, like a single outpost, but more like a collection of modules. So just to continue on with the module building and the module creation, we can jump to Christian. And Christian can talk in a bit more detail about the visual development process we did for creating the exteriors of these new outposts.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the colonialism, and now I'm going to show you a little bit more about the modules. So the very first thing that we did was creating all the primitives and all the primitive shapes into 3D. So as you can see here, we have a lot of variety, right? There's the cubic coming in, there's the cylinder coming in, the spheres coming in. For example, if I take this building over here and I duplicate it and move it around, I could just simply grab some of the other ones and combine them together. And you will see later on that this is one of our archetypes, or one that we pretty much liked, right? So you can see here already there's a lot of variety of entrances, maybe some garages, maybe some smaller entrances for those NPCs or for the players, right? And if I zoom in, all of a sudden you can already see like how they react to the environment or the overall scale, right? So if I pan over here and you see these buildings on the back in the background, so you're always having a first-person standpoint or first-person view. So we were not only creating those entrances, but also smaller details, and very briefly looking into the modules. So what you can see here is the very first concepts for the solar panels, for example, or the top-mounted, the roof-mounted solar panels. In the background, you see some other nice details that we can then just pick and put on our buildings, right? And some of the very last that we did is then pretty much those. So those were one of the archetypes. And you see there are small buildings for housing or housing buildings. There are some building types that are more communal. We have some secondary and tertiary buildings like those radio towers. If you imagine you're a colonist on a planet, right? There are multiple settlements on a planet. How would they communicate with each other? So we have a kind of a radio tower, or some of those cooling devices. So if you imagine maybe there's something underground, there's an even bigger facility underground because you're on a very hostile planet environment. So you want to store your very sensitive data underground, and we were looking at those hints of life. Maybe you are a kind of a farmer. So you see already this is the first archetype. This is more cylindrical. There are some storage spaces coming in here and there. So where would you store your oxygen or your water, gases, for example? All of this is just a consideration from our side. Going over to the next one, this is more pyramidical. So we were looking at also again the same materials, or changing up the materials. So now it is again more concrete, and the color palette is changing. There are some of the storage coming in, and going then over to the next one, it is again looking at different materials. There's some storage buildings that are not in one big storage facility, but it's divided into smaller parts. So you have to walk around your settlement and see like, okay, I can put some stuff in here, but if I need something else, then I need to walk over there. And there is some playing around with some more entrances and windows. How do they react to the environment, right? So this was just one of the very many files that we created. So those are mostly buildings, but we have different files for assets and props, and how they would fit inside this main architectural style that we wanted to see more involved, right? So just a very early version of the refinery, for example. But all of this in the end was given us the opportunity to just cherry pick the best ideas that we felt appropriate for this specific colonialism style, right? And where other people were able then to just grab the best parts and then use it in the actual game engine. Yeah, and this was pretty much the concept development for the colonialism modules. I hope you have a great time, and wish you all the best for the next panels that are coming up.
Awesome, thanks Cristiano. So that pretty much covers the work we've been doing on the exteriors. So now let's jump to the interiors. So We pretty much had to follow that same ideation process that we did for the exterior, but now for the interior. Now, slightly more simple, we knew there was a few key areas that we needed to design. First, it was the social space. You know, this is basically these kind of communal hubs. We knew we wanted like that open kitchen, seating areas, windows, an area where people could kind of hang out and, you know, relax. And then second to that was habitation. You know, we knew these are going to need to be abodes. We knew we needed bathrooms, hab units. But again, nothing in here would be, you know, pre-manufactured. So we wanted actual beds, not racks of beds. So everything about this process was about, you know, creating a design which you would look at and relate to and think, oh, I could see myself living there. I could see someone living there for quite a long period of time. So in habitation, you know, it's soft surfaces, soft shapes, but again, something which felt fairly integrated into the core architecture. In contrast to that, we knew we needed technical spaces. You know, these could be used in the future to be, I don't know, soil processing rooms or anything really within a technical bracket. So this one was quite a tricky one because, again, we needed to describe a feeling of age and you know, a type of historical depth in this. So we tried a few you know, visual cues, like, you know, there's the physical tape deck, you know, the clicky buttons, you know, again, to give you that feeling of like, all right, this isn't necessarily like a modern technology level, you know. And then the last major visual archetype was engineering. So these are the type of spaces. It could be a power room or an engine room, or some areas if your armor got beat up, you could, you know, repair your armor in there. Basically, it's a language which will enable us to create a variety of like engineering type spaces. And then once we'd established a spread of visual archetypes, we knew that they were all working well together. We could take that as a format and then start to think about more about actual themes that we wanted in these outposts.
Yeah, kind of looking at who would be the people that would be inhabiting it, what are the circumstances that would drive them to be there. And so we sort of came up with, like, I call it the triangle of kind of the edge points of the sort of the independent, the outlaw, and the corporate. And, you know, where the inhabitants would fall somewhere in that spectrum of 3 points. And it's also important to note too, you know, that this stuff would be applicable for the stuff we've done in Stanton. Like if we wanted to add these backwards in Stanton as well, that it wasn't just exclusively pyro-based.
Basically, when we was doing the design process, we pretty much focused on independent, mainly because that was our baseline. It was very easy to kind of design these and visually design these spaces to, is it like an independent farmer or is it an independent miner? And then with that, we wanted to really create an experience where you walked into one of these outposts and it feels old. It feels relatable, but it doesn't feel recognizable. Kind of similar to if you went to like a historic ruin or a historic part that you'd never really been to before.
Or, yeah, somebody's old farm.
Exactly. So we did a lot of exploration process of like, what type of artifacts would you find there? You know, how did people used to decorate the house in this time period? You know, you'd still see patterns, surfaces, shapes in these independent outposts.
Yeah, even early versions of modern technology. So you could see that, you know, oh, this is like the mobiglass I have, but it's an older mobiglass, or just as an example.
But also when we were, even just to back up a little bit, when we're talking about the planets, we have a certain style, or we have certain amounts of points of interest that we want to go to, how we pull the player around the universe. And so Dave and I and Will and others sit down and talk and say, all right, what do we need here? And all right, well, we need mining facilities. And then that helps to inform Ian and the other design teams and our teams of, all right, is that an independent theme? Is it a corporate theme? Is it an outlaw theme? So these are all kind of layers, but the first and foremost, it's, oh, this is farming, or this is mining, or this is, cargo.
Because looking at something like Pyro 2, which, again, starting from that sort of original Précis sentence of the planet, was the idea was like that was a heavily mined out planet that had been kind of stripped of a lot of resources. So there would be remaining infrastructure that would have been corporate back in the day, but is now independent or now even an outlaw setting. So, and then there would be the ones that would just be a straight independent one and stuff like that. But yeah, exactly like you said, we start with that sort of the base and then apply the theming to it to kind of.
When we're thinking about the theming, we kind of wanted like a space catalog, like a furniture catalog. So I know this is quite big for Chris, is we kind of went down that process of, okay, let's design this one independent outpost in a few different ways. Like how could people have decorated it in many different ways? And it's quite a fun process because you basically create space furniture catalogs, which again are going to be ways for the developers to be able to dress and world build, but eventually maybe it's a way for people to decorate their own spaces. When we're thinking about the outlaw versions of these outposts, again, the process is very similar. You think about the visual rule sets which would turn this into an outlaw outpost, namely, has it been taken over by hostile intent? Is the signs of combat, is the signs of destruction still present? The actual physical act of occupying one of these outposts, have they defended it, have they boarded it up?
Yeah, it could be any number of situations. Yeah, it could be outlaws are squatting here and they're operating it as a base, which makes it a potential combat space. Or is it, was it potentially an independent refinery that outlaws attacked and killed everybody there, and now
is it a drug facility, so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And then lastly, on with the corporate, it's something that we really want to advance out into in the future, but that feeling that this location is owned by a corporate umbrella, that would tie into the branding. Maybe it ties into the costumes that you'd expect the NPCs to be in there. So there's a huge amount of visual world building that we can do to, present these outposts in a few different ways.
And even potentially reputation as well. Like we talked before about that idea that if you do missions for a corporate outpost, that it, reflects in your general relationship with that corporation.
I mean, that ties into the clan tags. Like maybe you've just come from one of the space stations that, was occupied by a certain gang type, and then they sent you to a settlement on one of the surfaces of Pyro, and clearly it's been, tagged by a different gang. So you basically want that read and that consistency throughout. Now, one of the outpost themes that I was quite excited about getting into was the idea of a trading outpost. We've been talking about, buying and selling for a while, but thinking about it in a frontier context, it's almost like the money's kind of worthless, but it's more about the ability to barter or trade. So fundamentally, I thought it'd be cool that if we kind of design a module which focuses around one of these trading posts. So within a planet, it's where, people would kind of, trek to and, barter or trade components and then go back. We was talking about the idea of if I had a farm in the middle of nowhere, like, would I want a load of credits or would I want that one component that, kept my farm going, So we did, we took that idea and we ran with it, and we did some visual exploration into what would a trading post be like on one of these frontier outposts. So as you can see on the images, we wanted that feeling of the majority of the stuff around this outpost is pretty much junk. Spaces isn't at a premium, so they just keep it outside. Maybe it's rusting, maybe it's rotting, maybe it's getting overgrown. But I love that idea is as you're approaching one of these settlements, it's very easy to understand, all right, this is a trading post because, there's just all of that stuff like hodgepodge around the outside.
Well, and it opens up another aspect to it, which is the characters who inhabit it, because the sort of general shop experience that you have with the storekeeper is very conventional. This is what we've done so far has been a lot of franchise stores, actual companies that own, that are selling wares, who have customer service and stuff like that. And the idea being that out here, the experience is going to be much more different. It's not going to be that polished.
Exactly.
It's going to be much more of a personal interaction with somebody. So it's been really fun talking with, the AI and behavior guys to try and work out exactly like how is that dynamic supposed to work and feel like for the player.
All right, cool. So that was a little bit about the interiors of these outposts. So let's throw it over to Eric now, and he can go into a lot more detail into the visual design process we did for the interiors.
Hello, I am Eric Gagnon, Principal Concept Artist on Star Citizen. Today I will present the interior colonialism outpost concept and explain a bit how the pre-production process works. The goal is to create an interior design for the homestead colonialism outpost. It was the first time we had to create a timeless design look. We have the objective to create something warm and with a cozy feeling interior. At the beginning, we started from this concept art made by Christian Dorwitz. We have a lot of information in there to inspire the interior design. In those interior, we have a specific zones. Social area, place to eat together, play game, leisure, the bedroom, place to relax, have a proper personal space, and of course, sleeping. The engineering room, the place for the building machine who maintains the possibility to survive there. The technical room, the appropriate space to analyze minerals, some elements of the planet entrance, used for storage material and stuff to go outside. At the beginning, we had an overview of the plant that's helped to organize the zone. To create all of those areas, we need to do a lot of exploration and design. Social area. For those sketches, we want a centerpiece on the ceiling. Could be a light, fan, or whatever that could be cool. We feel the curvy shape of that space. Here on this sketch, I play with a very contrast values and a greenish color palette. That one is the best. Long vertical windows from the side, let the light inside a lot. After validation of the most relevant sketch, we do a 3D blackout. As you see, this 3D blackout follows very closely to the last sketches. From the screenshot of the 3D blackout, I did a sketch over in a gray tone value. That helps to better organize the coloring phase to make sure all the elements fit and will live together. After this, I like to do a 2D elevation concept. It's a good way to make sure all elements fit together and the ratio proportions between each of them. The final key shot of the social area brings it alive. Nice lighting comes from the windows. Cozy mood gives a soul to this social area. Now my concept art co-workers extract the elements from this key shot and break down the props to define more accurately. First, the homestead radial contour done by Danny Chan from the UK. That concept is the perfect blueprint to start the production. The color lighting people food is there on this one. More close-up version on specific zones of the radial kitchen contour. Some explanation are had to properly convey the intent of each part. All the details are there to define a fully functional stove. For the bedroom area, the process is the same as the social area. The sketch phase is essential. As you see here is an example of grayscale sketch. From one of those shots, we get a validation from art directors and CR. And boom, this is the final one. To detail the engineering room, we again go back to the painting technique. This process again is key to send us in the right direction. The detail of the machinery, cabling, metal grates really help convey the ambience of the room and also informs what players will have to do when they go to this place. For the technical room, we wanted to make sure the technology came true. Again, it's the same process where we start from manual painting to set the tone and then deep dive into color, elevation, and then the final key piece. To make the homestead a living space, the bathroom props are important to define the functionality of futuristic hygiene. Finally, let's exit by the entrance. This is the first sketch exploration I did for Star Citizen. The goal of the homestead entrance is to show what the player has access to and set the overall ambience of the place. A huge thanks to all for helping to make the final result in the game match the amazing work that is produced during pre-production. I sincerely hope you will enjoy living in those homesteads in Star Citizen. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Eric. Awesome stuff.
Now that we've shown a lot of art and talked a lot of theory, we want to get into game and show off what we've been working on. We're going to be showing you kind of multiple playthroughs and how it changes based off of what you do and how you have faction with the certain game. So here we are waking up in 400i that will be released in 3.15. This is the competitor to the Constellation. Doesn't compromise cargo for vehicle storage. It's faster, more agile than the Connie, and it can run with a smaller crew. So this is the captain's quarters, and then we'll go out and see a little bit more of the habitation deck, and then make our way to the cockpit. So this would be the social area that you can meet and eat and basically plan your next mission. And then from here, we'll go to the cockpit. So here we're over Pyro 3. We've come here for a mission to acquire an artifact. And you'll be making your way down to a trading post. So wanted to just give you a quick overview, and then we can start talking about the planet.
Yeah, Pyro 3 is just a terrestrial planet. It has a very thin, breathable atmosphere, but it's still pretty inhospitable, very cold. As you can see, some of those lightning strikes in the clouds, but yeah, very, very pretty looking.
So this is the first time we're actually seeing clouds above a terrestrial planet. You know, we went through quite a few iterations of forms. What we ultimately ended upon was something that felt quite dramatic, still believable in terms of how the wind would have shaped them. But yeah, like it's showcasing a lot of the more recent tech that came online. Also, what we're seeing here is like some kind of distant thunder strikes. And what this is, it's kind of like a prelude to, you know, future weather features that will be coming on board, you know, and how this will tie into, you know, storms and ship handling, you know, due to the turbulence. And it's great seeing the, you know, the rain hit the canopy glass here, you know, when you go through these cloud banks. Also, as part of the process of shaping, one of the things we really wanted to do is create these kind of like these pockets in between the clouds. So you're in these cavities, so as you're flying through, you get a glimpse of the terrain beneath you. But you know, it feels really quite exhilarating, you know, to fly through. Also, as well, like it's showcasing a lot of the more recent tech coming on board as well. So, you know, it's a lot of optimizations been going on. So it's way more performant than previously it was. Also, like the level of artifacting that we're seeing here is substantially reduced, certainly on higher spec machines.
It also gives you a great sense of parallax when you fly through these cloud sandwiches.
A cloud sandwich?
Yes, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're the meat or the cheese of a cloud sandwich.
The cheese of a cloud sandwich. So as we get out of the cheese, another really big feature that was important for me was, you know, terrain shadowing and terrain occlusion from the clouds. So you're actually seeing, you know, these large areas of occlusion cast onto the terrain. it just adds that depth. It just adds that believability to what we're seeing in the frame. And you know, when you see like these dark overcast clouds in the hovering above the mountains, it finally completes the frame, especially when you see these distant rumbles of thunder in the distance.
So James Cameron, who's doing the run through, yes, that is his name. He will be taking us down to the outpost. The goal for us is to basically make 50 of these, whether they're inhabited or derelicts or even basically inhabited by a farmer or inhabited by a gang. So the goal is to have these act as different factions, and so that you can develop different rep associated with them. And you can start seeing how big these outposts stretch to with the comms tower that's behind us, and then even some of the AA turrets that you'll actually see up close and personal.
That was a really good approach from James there. Good landing. That was a good solid 3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Jeez.
Ian's a tough grader.
Yeah, I'd go 6 at least.
No one's ever got a 6.
Gotta watch me land, man.
So here we'll go down to the technical deck. Show off the cargo area as well as the climate-controlled component areas, and then onto the gravity generator room and the stairway out. So you'll be able to learn more about the ship in one of the later panels that we have with Ben, Paul, and John. I think the team did a great job on this. I think this is one of my favorite skins. Yeah.
Yeah, they did a new skin, just something that felt a lot more, suitable for Pyro. But you can see how it feels suitably worn and weathered, to fit into these climates. And what we're seeing here is first boots on the ground, on Pyro. I think it looks great, especially in contrast to what we're seeing here is like actual AI on the terrain, walking about, going about their business. And is that an AA turret there?
It is. And radio comms towers and all these other elements that we want to make sure that are interactive for the player and allows them to go and explore or use to their advantage. We want them to be able to interact with these different items.
Here you can see like various outpost modules, to the right there, we've got the garage unit. You can see the infrastructure on the roof. But this large, beautiful, archway here kind of signifies, the main entrance, the primary entrance to the main social module. I think the airlocks look great, fits in with the art style beautifully.
The team did a great job on this.
And then we've seen the concept art previously in the day, and then here you can see it translated in game, and I think it absolutely looks fantastic. The radial forms, is quite special to this art style, and you can see how that complements these archways that lead into other areas of the outpost.
So with the AI, we want to make sure that it's living, it's breathing. If you look back a little bit, there was a chef actually cooking. There's security guards here to make sure that they're actually protecting their investments, protecting their home from strangers. And then, but you have good rep with them, and so they allow you to kind of enter into certain areas that the other players wouldn't be able to enter into.
We also got a quick shot at the the loadout that James is playing. So it's a female loadout, but it's also showing the backpack, which is new. Also, some of the new hair as well, which is rendering much nicer.
So here the player will make their way out to the trading post, go see the dealer, acquire the artifact.
And for the trading post, we wanted to get all of the junk on the outside as well, so the player can see it as they're approaching. We wanted, as many tops as we could, and you can see it's using the new soft deck shader, so these are reacting to the planetary wind, the same force that the tall grass and the moss on the ground is reacting to as well.
Other thing with the trading post is, like Ian spoke about before, the inventory and what they'll be able to actually sell here will vary depending on where they're at in the solar system. Are they close to a jump point where they might be coming down and using this as a chop shop, or are they in a very rural area that's, they care more about the frontier lifestyle and being able to survive versus money?
We passed the kitchen as well on the way back there. That's the local diner for this outpost. Tough crowd. Also, so in the inside as well, we wanted this, kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. Like it's just literally the dealers displaying all the wares, everything they'll have outside in the open here.
Welcome. Take a look. I'm sure I have what you want, and if not, I'll have something just as good. Oh yeah, very good choice. Very good.
So after 5 million credits of disposable income, we get our first look at the Hadesian artifact, which is obviously going to be what is sort of a super rare thing that you'll hopefully be able to start finding in the galaxy. Which is sort of, if you're familiar with the lore of Hades, was an old civilization that destroyed itself. So somehow this trader has gotten their hands on this artifact.
So here we're showing one way of actually playing through this area. It really depends on your standings within the gang and how they want to deal with you. And then what's the dealer going to do? What's the dealer going to charge you? And from there, we have different ways of actually showing this. And we can look at option 2 now. So here we're going to run it back a little bit and show off a different way of entering into the trading post. This is a little bit more straightforward versus in demo 1 we took a side route through the social area.
So yeah, this is just some additional warehouse space that the trading post would have, and you can see it will lead directly onto this courtyard. And for the keen-eyed people, you'd see that the barbecue's still not been eaten yet.
The grill master would be fired.
Yeah. Still full of wieners.
So with this area, again, we just want to make sure that it's filled out with items, filled out with different things that you can interact with and possibly buy. It's like Dave said in the beginning, we want the stores to feel different here, but it's still making it feel believable.
Quick reference to some additional traversal areas there on the right when we came in.
Welcome. Take a look. I'm sure I have what you want, and if not, I'll have something just as good.
Yeah. The guys had a lot of fun dressing these areas. There's a lot of storytelling going into it.
So here we decide not to pay the price. And we want to We don't mind losing reputation with the faction, and decide that we're going to take the artifacts through betrayal.
Just take it. Straight in the backpack.
So here we've got different routes for the players to enjoy and to use to flank and also navigate around. So each area will have different secondary and tertiary routes of navigation. James was really just trying to scare him there versus actually kill him.
That was intentional. Good shot, James.
You could also, if you notice real quick, there was the civilians are actually cowering as opposed to fighting, which is kind of, you'll see another coming up. But it's super cool.
So again, here the player will have the choice, you know, do they actually want to interact with the civilians, or, you know, does their conscience get better of them?
I think James made the right choice there.
He was nice, yeah.
One of the things when we was playtesting this a lot is when you see the enemy AI kind of fanning out across the terrain like that, it's fantastic to see. It feels really great. Just seeing the base start to wake up to you and actually trying to exfiltrate. Also, I know it's under you know, combat stress, but that yellow grass just looks fantastic. That's how I play.
So here, James just wants to get out real quick. As we slightly hinted to in the first walkthrough, this is where the AA turrets will come alive, and basically, if you're not fast enough, as James isn't, with your countermeasures, then they'll take you down. So what we saw there was the player went in, and based off their actions, the faction changed against them, and then basically became very aggressive. So in this last playthrough, what we'll show you is if the faction is already against you from the very beginning, and what are different ways that you can go about it. So here we are in our last walkthrough. Since you're all by yourself, we wanted to show the player take a stealthy route versus if you were with friends, you could go in guns blazing. But this allows the player to come in, access the outpost from a different side than what we've shown. It also allows them to clock all the AI and see how they want to approach the problem and see what other secondary or tertiary routes would be open to them, either via the ladder or maybe a possible door.
Good night. That was a great shot. Also, one thing we did as well, as Todd said, you know, we changed the time of day. The wind is slightly stronger, so you'll see the gorgeous yellow grass blowing just a little bit more intense than before. Also, what we're seeing here is like something to imply at the frontier living. You know, maybe they're growing crops or vegetables out here, but it also gives a kind of like a soft cover approach to the perimeter of the base. Nice.
Also, with it being a different time of day, this allows us to show off the AI having their 24-hour schedules so that they can be in different areas when you approach it. So if you approach it at night or you approach it during the morning, you know, they'll be doing different things, whatever is valid for their schedule.
That door's locked, so there's no going through that way. But what James does actually see here as he's scouting out the next AI is, just checking the roofline. But as I said previously, we wanted as many kind of like views in to the base as possible. Just so the player can continue to keep context of what's inside.
But also when you're inside, it allows the player to have context of where they're at within the actual outpost. And that was a great shot.
The AI fell beautifully on the already called out beautiful yellow grass and moss. Also, as James is looking back, what he's doing is actually making a mental map of possible routes, possible advanced traversal routes on top of the outpost. And we saw the dealer there in the bedroom, just end of the day.
So with each outpost, there'll be different routes that will be open to the player or closed to the player. So some of them might have ladders on the outside, some of them might not. Some of them might have basically ways to get in through the floorboards, other ones won't. But this is just one version of, many possibilities. So here, the player will take a secondary route of navigation all the way up to the roof, and then from here, this allows them to be able to check out any of the AI, also be able to look at any of the interactables. In the future, if you got good reputation, maybe you need to go and fix different items on the roof, or if you are there for nefarious means, then maybe you want to take out the power, and which will then kill the AA turrets, or will turn off the lights in the outpost. So it allows the player to interact with different items and then basically create a nice little sandbox for them to play in. So here you can see one of those interactables as well as the AI.
And just behind these interactables, like we're seeing these kind of archways. Like right now, these are just kind of empty, and to just illustrate like a guard point. In the future, these could be maybe customizable, or they could contain like an AA turret, like we saw on demo 1, or it could contain like cargo storage. Basically, we tried to design something that was as flexible as possible.
So here we're showing off the looting system as well as the inventory system. So this will be shipping in 315. This allows bodies to be able to be interacted with and take off the items associated with it. Also, with this change, you will no longer have global inventory, so you can't be pulling off weapons that you didn't take with you to this location. Everything will be regarding what you carry is what you have, and so it really makes the players think about how they want to approach the problem, and then also encourages them to look around and see if the designers and have placed different things that they can interact with or use to help get past a certain route or a certain way that they maybe didn't bring with them.
And we'll also be including the, I believe in 315, the Knickknacks app for your mobiGlass. So now that you aren't carrying everything on your body and it's not sort of universal inventory, you'll be able to consult this app to see kind of where stuff is being stored and keep it better organized and stuff like that.
So here, this allows the player to have a quick little puzzle, but just gives them a little bit more interaction, and then allows them to go on to what I would consider a tertiary route, versus climbing up the ladder and possibly having to deal with the AI or them being spotted by them. also, I think the team did a great job on the planet as well as the outpost. These are really fun to play and sneak around in, and you know, allows for many possible, you know, ways of attacking the same problem.
What we're seeing here is like James is actually getting up onto through one of these like rooftop storage modules, and it's given like the highest point in the base. So from here, you can actually, you know, make probably the most informed decisions on, you know, how to approach the next problem. You know, we're seeing this guard routine here, and then ultimately, you know, throwing an item to distract the guard.
Allows them to go and access new areas. It's a behavior that we're still working out, but at least we're seeing like the first iterations and be able to continue to optimize it as well as make sure that the behavior is working properly.
So we just saw that for the first time. It's like the first rooftop airlock hatch. So previously, route in and out, if the outside wasn't pressurized, like we wouldn't have this option. But now through that rooftop airlock, you can cycle and then, you know, infiltrate through the roof. And also what we're seeing here is, you know, potentially scouting out an advanced traversal up into the rafters, you know, getting on top of some infrastructure and getting like this overview as we go into the garage module.
So here, this is placeholder, but it gives you an idea of, you know, we want to have different interactables, different loot boxes laid out around the location. So if the players explore, they'll be rewarded. You know, we want to encourage them looking in every nook and cranny and enjoying, you know, what the outpost has for them.
And one of the things that's interesting is these garages won't be vehicle spawn points, so it's not like a big kind of like pad in the middle, but it's more like, you know, if you want to have your vehicle there, you got to drive it in and park it. So here you can see a variety of vehicles just laid out how the player would have just parked them. Just gives a much more believable and realistic design.
So again, we're just encouraging different navigation, different routes for the player to go and see. Over to the left, back there was a possible way of going into the floorboards or going underneath the outpost. Again, those will be opened up or closed off based off of, you know, just how we want to build the outpost. Not every one will be built the same. Our philosophy for these are to make sure that each one of them feels unique, and this is just one way of us customizing it and making each one feel different. And so the player won't always be used to the same route. So here, again, we're using the inventory system. We allow the players to go in and if you take out a certain AI, they might have different tools or different notes or different items that you'll need in order to solve your mission.
Interestingly, when we was designing these spaces, we knew we wanted these internal airlocks, but we knew we needed some sort of like view, like porthole on them, just so before you commit through, before you cycle, you know, you can just double check to see if there's any bad guys on the other side.
So we got some ragdoll bugs. I guess it wouldn't be a Citizen Con without any sort of issues or bugs.
So here, like previously the players being, you know, on the roof, they've come down through the main section of the outpost. But here what the player's doing is they go into the underfloor section. So these aren't vents, but they're more like subfloors. So they're meant to feel very dark, very minimal, but you're actually seeing the foundations of these outposts. So inside here, it's the player will need to kind of work out how to navigate through them. It's very much like a torch-based experience, you know. And then within here, what the player can actually do is work out roughly where they are in relation to the to what's upstairs. And what you're seeing here, like this light bleeding down through, you know, you can kind of make informed decisions. Or okay, that's where that AI was, or right now the player is just underneath that main social space. So if you think back, like that was that guard in the beginning, just next to the kitchen counter. But you know, we've intentionally made these spaces not necessarily like very easy to navigate, because you know there wouldn't be a lot of light down here. You know, the player would have to, you know, follow, for example, like James is following the blue wire here. You know, making a decision to like, hey, if I follow that blue wire, I'm probably going to get to something interesting, or a point where I can actually, you know, exit this subfloor space and get back up above.
And what I like about them is basically just the claustrophobic feel of it, and then obviously the addition of possible secondary or more advanced navigation. So either going into prone or just going full crouch.
So here we come out in the bathroom space. It's on the other side of the garage, so we're on the opposite side of the outpost from where we just were.
It's a good ragdoll.
Now the body drag in the shower.
So here, this is just a different wrapper on a loot box. In this case, it's a hamper. And so the player will be able to really change outfits and adjust the way that they look, so that they can walk around the outpost and not be noticed. There will be kind of a certain time limit associated with it. We still need to work out the details on how all that will work, but the goal is to give them a little bit of leeway. And so if you look the part, maybe you're not scrutinized as much, and the AI won't notice you as quickly.
So here we can see back into the social space, but this time on the other side. And then this door will lead directly into the habitation room that we saw previously on the outside.
Speaking of fun ragdoll physics.
That was a great one.
So here, the player decided to take the dealer out instead of actually figuring out how they could open up the safe. So they're going to have to look around the room. They're going to have to interact with the body and possibly see, you know, is there a way for them to actually open it? In other cases, maybe the safe will be hackable in the future, and in some cases it won't be. And then you'll need to figure out a different way of actually opening it.
So here we spot a little clue, a little note, and you'll notice the what's fun is like the name on here. If you look back and see the some of the AI we've been taken out, you may notice some names. So here's the clue for the player. But one of the coolest things for me here is the player is holding an item with the clue, and while holding the item, they can seamlessly interact with another item to solve a puzzle. That's awesome.
And then here we got a little bug. The player was able to acquire the artifact, and then will be able to do whatever they want with it, either sell it or be able to use it somehow in a future mission.
One of the things that was really exciting about watching this kind of back to back to back is finally getting to see that freedom of choice. And it's like, it's really, really, I mean, again, our locations are always spectacular and beautiful, but now like having that sort of striking that balance between, this sort of well thought out social space and construction of these locations, but also an equally effective stealth and combat thing. It's super cool to see.
So after seeing the demo played through, 3 different ways, it was a huge team effort. So everyone that worked on the project, on this part of what we wanted to show, we want to say a big thank you, a big shout out, because we're just presenting it. It's the people that did a lot of the hard work that should be represented. And speaking of people doing hard work, now's a good chance to throw it over to Eddie and Joel, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about the how we built that outpost that we just saw.